Well, completely rebooting things is certainly one way to get around the awkwardness of a Bond era transition. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. As part of my 007 video series, today I'm going to be ranking the 5 Daniel Craig Bond films. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. So, what is a rankography exactly? Well, it's my ranking of a filmography, whether that be a director's output, an actor's appearances, or even an entire franchise. My rankographies are based on personal preference, and I rank movies according to how much I enjoyed them, rather than any sort of specific technical merit or attribute. Remember, this is just my ranking, not the ranking, so be sure to post your own personal ranking of the Craig-era Bond films in the comments below. The start of the 6th era in the James Bond franchise brought along with it a degree of change never before seen in the series. Previous era transitions were simply continuations. The largely episodic standalone nature of nearly every Bond film of the first 5 eras made it relatively easy to swap out Bond actors and continue on like nothing happened. But the Craig era was markedly different. This was a cohesive era with sweeping 5-film story and character arcs, each successive film relying on the previous films to provide information and context. And so a mere sleight of hand actor swap wasn't going to cut it here. Instead, the Craig era functioned as a reboot of the series, allowing us to watch Bond go from cocky, newly promoted 00 agent to seasoned veteran over the course of 5 films and 15 years. I've already reviewed all 5 Daniel Craig era Bond movies, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below and also link them up in the cards as we go along. Alright, let's get this rankography started. Coming in at number 5, Quantum of Solace. Despite its last place position in the era, I don't actively dislike Quantum of Solace. In fact, as a relative Bond neophyte, I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit when I saw it in the theater. That enjoyment has certainly waned over the years, but when viewed as a blockbuster action film, this movie gets the job done. It's absolutely packed with big spectacle action set pieces, and although a departure from its predecessor in that regard, this second film in the era delivers on the explosions and gunfights fans of the action genre crave. But as a James Bond film, it's a little disappointing. And as a direct follow-up to Casino Royale, well, the drop in quality is honestly baffling. Shedding the typical unrelated episodic nature of past eras, this film picked up immediately after the events of Casino Royale. Given the excitement and emotional impact of its predecessor's ending, that should have all but guaranteed an equally exciting and impactful follow-up here. But despite its continuation of that storyline, Quantum of Solace wasn't able to capitalize on any of the good that Casino Royale had set up for it. It's got the most underwhelming villain of the era, a muddled story that functions more as filler to set up future movies than it does as a standalone plot, and this film sees one of the most bizarre Bond personality shifts ever, essentially making him feel like an entirely different character from not only Casino Royale, but also the follow-up, Skyfall. Coming in at number 4, Spectre. Although this film has some issues, I do enjoy it, and so the gap between the number 5 film and this one is fairly large. And while I can understand the general dislike for Quantum of Solace, I think Spectre is perhaps a bit unfairly maligned. This film was forced into kind of a weird spot, simply due to its placement in the series. It had the unfortunate honor of following the very well-crafted Skyfall. Not only would that have been hard to top, but Skyfall also functions as a conclusion of sorts. Those first 3 films constituted a narrative trilogy with a very contained character arc. So Spectre feels separate, like it was tacked on, because it kind of was. It's tasked with tying up some loose ends, but does so by creating this large, interconnected, conspiratorial story that feels a little far-fetched. Though, it was satisfying to see the reintroduction of Blofeld and Spectre, because it had been a while, about 45 years. Since this movie acted as a bit of a mid-era reset, we did see the introduction of a new Bond girl, Madeline Swan. And while she isn't a top-tier Bond girl for me, I do think she was a refreshing addition. Unlike so many of the previous Bond girls who practically fall all over themselves to be near Bond, Madeline is very reluctant to have anything to do with him, which sets up an interesting dynamic to their partnership and adds a bit of uncertainty to the mix. Unfortunately, that does not help this film overcome its significant pacing issues. It's periodically dull, with far too many committee meetings for an espionage thriller. Luckily, it does have some good action sequences to break things up a bit, including the fantastic single-take cold opening in Mexico City. Coming in at number 3, No Time to Die. The 25th official Bond film, the 5th film of the Craig era, and the conclusion of our 6th Bond era land smack dab in the middle of this ranking. That might not sound good, but really, the middle is a very fitting position for this film, because the movie itself is situated right in the middle of typical and atypical. There are a few unexpected turn of events, but the overarching story of this movie is an assemblage of things we've seen in previous Bond films. Bond coming out of retirement, him having issues with leadership, betrayal, take over the world villain plot. But this movie also does a number of things we've never seen before, not just in the Craig era, but in any Bond film. Although better than some of the other villains in the era, Safin is a bit underwhelming. I don't think he's awful. He's definitely very creepy and unsettling, but he's severely underutilized, with even the film basically just using him for his evil plan. Similarly, the plot of this movie, at times, feels like it's simply being used as a means to an end. The story makes sense, but it gets a bit jumpy at times, randomly abandoning plot threads and even whole characters like Paloma. But in spite of its occasional inconsistency, this is still a very satisfying Bond film. It's got the exciting action you'd expect from this era, but it's also just a nice conclusion to Craig Bond's character arc that we've been following for the last 15 years. A Bond era ending on a good film is pretty rare, and this is probably, fittingly, the best era ending we've had. Coming in at number 2, Skyfall. So it's really hard for me to pick between my number 1 and number 2 Craig era films. These upper two are really close, and probably could have gone either way for me, but I should note that both of them are quite a bit better than my number 3 pick. Okay, so even though I put Skyfall in the number 2 spot, I would say that this is probably the most well-crafted and technically impressive Bond film, not only of the era, but the entire franchise, at least as of right now. Pretty fitting for the 50th anniversary Bond film, and also pretty remarkable coming off of the era low point, Quantum of Solace. Whereas its predecessor was action-packed for the sake of being action-packed, Skyfall sees the return of exciting, impressive action with purpose. It propels the story forward, and has actual impact for the characters. Speaking of the story, Skyfall delivers a very engaging, well-paced, and earnest narrative. It's not only interesting from an espionage standpoint, but also from a character standpoint, and that might be the most significant thing about this film. Bond is a person here. He's older, he's more experienced, he's a realistic progression of the character we saw introduced back in Casino Royale. But this film does something striking. It digs into Bond's backstory. Over the years, we had seen very brief glimpses into his history, but Skyfall, in part, is an exploration of his past, and a character-driven examination of his present. And from a character standpoint, this is perhaps the most compelling James Bond has ever been. So that means my number 1 Craig-era Bond film is Casino Royale. Like I said before, choosing between Skyfall and Casino Royale was tough, because these are very, very close for me, but I gotta give the slight edge to Casino Royale. The first film of any Bond era has always been a bit of a reset. A fresh start to allow the new actor to imbue the character and the movie with his unique approach. Casino Royale took this era reset to the extreme. Not only was this a fresh start, it was a complete reboot for the franchise. It functions as a bit of an origin story, beginning with Bond receiving his 00 status. This is a very different type of Bond film, which led into a very different type of Bond era. It's darker and grittier, with a more grounded sense of realism than we'd really ever seen in the franchise. This unique approach and tone really translated to just about everything in the film. The action, for instance, is much more brutal and realistically hard-hitting than the average Bond film. In many ways, it feels more Jason Bourne than traditional Bond, but I think it works really well in this rebooted era. Just like the action, James Bond himself is quite different from what we maybe had come to expect from the character. This isn't the experienced 007 we'd seen in the previous 20 films. He's young. He's just become a 00 agent here, and so he's out to prove himself. He's a bit arrogant, certainly prone to aggression, both of which set up nicely for his eventual era-spanning character arc. But he's still charming and surprisingly funny, so he still feels like Bond even though he's so different. Throw in a subtly menacing villain and one of the best Bond girls in the franchise, Vesper Lynd, and you've got not only the best Craig-era Bond film, but one of the best Bond films, period. Alright, so that's my rankography of the Craig-era Bond films. 5 movies, 15 years, and one massive reboot. What does your ranking look like? I'd love to see some reasoning for your order, so be sure to post it in the comments below. Remember, I've already reviewed all 5 of these movies, so you can check those videos out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this rankography, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more rankographies like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies. The way life should be.